Welcome back. We're going to talk today about men lead, women command. Now, you can find part 1 of Men Lead, Women Command, which I did last week on our YouTube channel. And with that out of the way, welcome to part 2 of our discussion of how men lead, women command. Let's start with more sex differences talk to further put the lie to the idea of patriarchy and an over-reliance on the effects of social conditioning. In the book Warriors and Worriers, Harvard's Joyce Benenson tells of studies examining young children playing in a sandbox during recess. If it's 2 boys and a third boy approaches to join in, the 2 boys usually welcome him after first confirming that he's not a girl. If it's 2 girls playing and a third girl attempts to join in, the little girls are apt to get up and leave rather than accept the interloper. And from her book, The Sexual Paradox, psychologist Susan Pinker, who happens to be sister to Harvard's Steven Pinker, tells of this Israeli study examining runners in grade school. They ran the girls against boys, and the girls posted their best times. Then running the boys against boys also produced best times. Then they ran the girls against the girls, and the times dropped. Why? No one wants to stand out. Researchers say social exclusion is too risky, so the girls slow down. They do it on purpose. You may remember that girls tend to compete differently than males. They maneuver covertly, using social exclusion, mean remarks, and by winning over each other's friends and allies. I remember explaining this to my divorce lawyer many, many years ago. He smiled and he said, "Hey, that's true." And then he told me about how his wife was upset that morning because she saw a gal who had just moved in a few doors down, walking into the house opposite theirs where her best friend lived. She was beside herself with worry, he said. All of that is similar to what drives tall poppy syndrome down under. That's when someone successful doesn't show sufficient humility and is cut down to size by the masses. I suspect this is the feminine safety in numbers need, demanding everybody be the same. It also reminds me of the detached manipulator, the active shadow of the magician archetype, found in the book King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, written in 1990 by Moore and Gillette, 2 Jungian analysts. And as a culture increasingly feminizes, we find ourselves run from the margins by a preposterous egalitarianism. But I digress. That women and men band together to take advantage of each other's strengths and to shore up each other's weaknesses is self-evident. This is how we've survived. 2 heads are better than 1. Consider that children are best raised with both a male and a female parent in place. The natural evolved family is mom, dad, and a series of allo parents, friends, relatives, grandparents, neighbors, siblings, all contributing to a child's welfare and their upbringing. Note, too, that the world over, a child's survival chances are much better when the father of the child remains present. A woman can and will lead a family, but she'll be playing 2 roles. Why? Because she can't stop being the mother. So unnaturally, taking on fatherly duties as well is extra responsibility. Look, both masculine and feminine energies exist in all of us. But if one is at her core feminine, wearing the pants will be emotionally and physically taxing. You've probably witnessed this yourself in your own family or in families that you know. Mama bear instincts aside, few women go into marriage expecting that they'll be the powerful defender of the 2, themselves and their husband, as well as the children. When a man is dependent and needy, it creates an imbalance, which often leads to a sexless marriage because the man fails to meet his own masculine destiny. That's how it works. She might stay with him. She might also see him as weak, failed at maturation, or worse, she may see him as a boy in a man's body. She may grow to accept this, of course, depending on her own upbringing or on how many mouths she's feeding with his paycheck, or perhaps even by way of strict religious affiliation. More so if he's been diagnosed with a physical or psychological disorder and he's got a good pension. Women rarely understand weak men. They just don't get them. And from what I can tell, it tends to drive her a little nuts, sometimes mildly and other times certifiably. She may become addicted to food to cope, for example, or to outright mental illness just in distraction. So let's talk about the defender. Archetypes are sort of mankind's memory and hold control over the human life cycle. They derive from what we call the collective unconscious of mankind and influence human thought and behavior. To that end, archetypes are expressed in full or in shadow, the best side of us or the worst side of us. We all have it. The shadow is the part of our existence we tend to hide from others. Now, the warrior archetype in full faces life's challenges directly and acts. He takes actions. The shadow does not. Let me give you this example. There's a difference between a man who goes to a job that he hates and suffers daily, and a man in similar circumstances who hates his job but tolerates it as a means to an end. Our first man will tend to live in the active and passive shadows of the warrior archetype. The passive shadow is the masochist, self-pitying, and the active shadow is the sadist, the blamer. A person living in shadow will show a preference for one or the other, but bounce between active and passive shadows. To that end, he may be inclined to at first hold things in and stew over them masochistically, and then blow up at others in retaliation, becoming tyrannical. Or he may blow up easily and then ruminate later, second guessing and reliving the whole episode, making a case in his head against others, justifying himself. Our second man does a job he's conscious of not liking, but aware it must be done to get by. And so he manages by living his warrior in full and enacting a plan to eventually escape his plight. See the difference? Every woman has some of the same warrior archetype found in most men. But when a woman buckles down and plays both roles in a family because of circumstances, that doesn't mean she's fucking happy. No, not by a long shot. No woman is fine taking on both roles while their man sits idly by. Of course, you know this full well. Hopefully, now you see the absurdity in this situation. Absent extreme mitigating circumstances, she will assuredly resent her predicament, and she may rub salt in the wounds of her partner's weaknesses to create some kind of motivating pain. Maybe you've felt it. And his reaction tells her if he's vested in the relationship or not. That's important too. She may also develop contempt for her significant other, which is likely. Sex is on the way out at that point. Women neither fuck boys nor their girlfriends. Both are taboo. Orgasms. Think about it. Orgasms keep people together. Few leave somebody who's giving them regular orgasms. Contempt kills orgasms and hence relationships. She is the creator of life. To that end, good women usually try to get their men to be better. She sees him in the future. Once a man understands this, he can see her in a different light, perhaps. He might appreciate how her nudges, how her pushings, just part of her nature. She never stops needing a powerful defender in her life. That's one reason I often say a man with a loyal woman by his side has the wind at his back, but he must stay out in front of her to feel it. To some, she is the storm that makes him crash. All this to say, it doesn't mean that when she says jump, you answer how high, but rather you're ahead of her, leading and taking care of business. For example, I've never seen a honey-do list in my life. Guys talk about that. I got online 10 years ago and people talking about honey-do lists. I don't know what the fuck they're talking. If there's something around me that requires my attention, I don't need anybody itemizing things and keeping score. I keep score with myself and I take care of my family on my own. If a man fails to see this and act accordingly, he risks a sexless marriage. Meanwhile, orgasms keep us together, remember? So how can that work? Men lead, women command are words from the monk poet Leonard Cohen. who gave us memorable tunes from Suzanne all the way to Hallelujah. He's a Canadian treasure. May he rest in peace. This is how the verse goes from Nevermind. The game of luck our soldiers played, the stones we cut, the songs we made, our law of peace, which understands a husband leads, a wife commands. Our law of peace, which understands a husband leads, a wife commands, sums it up really nicely. Something I learned way back in the day in the corporate world when I was training with Gallup and I was a senior VP of a company. I had 150 reps and 15 managers reporting to me in 7 different cities. In an era of supposedly unprecedented equality, most women, and back then, most men, prefer a male boss. Why is that? Over the years, more men now say they don't care what gender their boss is. They've kind of gotten used to it. But I think that speaks to his adaptability more than anything else. Go figure. Why is that? You piss a male boss off, and as long as you rectify things between you, the incident is usually forgotten. Not so with women. Maybe that's changing. I'm not sure. Women carry grudges, which I attribute to her default need for safety. So it makes sense. So lead, gentlemen. It's what we do best. What part of leading don't you get? If you don't lead, she'll command. Is that what you want? There are few women leaders who can galvanize people the way men can. Indira Gandhi, maybe, until she was whacked. Golda Meir, maybe, though I was young when she was around. Thatcher, she was a tough broad, I remember. I remember she had balls. The Scandinavians keep unearthing warrior princesses from the peat bogs in their excavations. In medieval times, there was a bunch of kingdoms in Europe run by queens. They're also more likely to start wars, I remember reading. Then there was Cleopatra, clearly a badass broad. But you can see the general tendency in the way women prefer a male boss. Why is that? I suggest it's because it meets the natural order of things, in that a woman's model for power and love is the father, less so the mother. She always needs a powerful defender of life. Never goes away. In functional families, men tend to lead. If not, women tend to bark until dad puts his foot down and takes control if he's not being listened to. And one of the jobs for men in a relationship is to provide balance and, if needed, rescue an overthinking woman from her insanity with reassurance. If you fail to man the fuck up and do this, you end up confused and may wind up in a Will Smith conundrum. Bless our brother Will. If a man is barking, he is living the tyrant or expressing the frustrated feminine. He's perverting his anima, the feminine energy in men. More about that another time. Because you are the powerful defender of life, you must hold reserves for you both. It is only men who can ensure that love prevails in a home. Just think of that. She can't do it without you. Every generality breaks down a little bit in the face of exceptions, and no one rule applies universally to all of us. Just keep in mind, though, the odd exception doesn't disprove the rule either. These generalized preferences seem to hold up well. So lead, mothers, or be commanded. If you have questions, if you have comments, send them off to me, holler, I'll answer them. In the meantime, like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, stay powerful, true, and free. Thanks for listening.